Respected viewers, beloved seekers of wisdom, let me share something with you today that will disturb your sleep tonight in the best possible way. There's a moment that comes to every person, a quiet moment, when you realize that everything you've been taught about money, everything you believed about debt and security, was preparing you for a game you no longer need to play. And the most dangerous part, you almost missed it. I've watched something peculiar happen over these many decades. I've seen brilliant people who built empires with their bare hands, people who survived the Depression, who fought in wars, who raised families on pennies, reach their 60s and suddenly become terrified of a number on a piece of paper. Debt. That word alone makes hearts race, makes palms sweat, makes 65-year-old men and women lie awake at 3 a.m, always calculating how to make the mortgage disappear, how to zero out that last credit card, how to die with a clean slate. But here's what nobody tells you. Sometimes the clean slate is the wrong slate. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine you're standing in your kitchen. You're 62 years old, maybe 65, maybe 70. You've worked 40 years, 40 honest years. You've got 150,000 in savings, maybe 200,000 if you were careful. That money took decades to accumulate. Every dollar represents a choice, a vacation not taken, a dinner not enjoyed, a risk not risked, and you've got debt, maybe 80,000 on the mortgage, maybe 30,000 spread across a few other things. Medical bills from when your spouse got sick, that loan you took to help your daughter with her wedding. The conventional wisdom, the Dave Ramsey disciples, the financial gurus on their podcasts, so they all scream the same thing: pay it off, be debt-free, debt-free. So you take that 150 Zillow's and money that could be earning you returns, creating cash flow, giving you options, and you write one big check. You wipe the debt clean, and then you sit there, debt-free and broke. Now, let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this. What did you actually win? You traded liquid capital, flexible, powerful, option creating capital for the psychological comfort of a zero balance. You traded the ability to respond to opportunity, to help your grandchild with college, to handle a medical emergency, to invest in something that could change your retirement, for a feeling of accomplishment that lasts about 90 days, until you realize you're living on $100 or $800 a month from Social Security, and you can't access the equity in your home without selling it or borrowing against it again. You solved the wrong problem. Let me tell you about a man I knew. We'll call him Robert. Robert wasn't a client. He was someone I met at a charity function in Omaha back in the 90s. Salt of the earth. Worked 37 years at the same manufacturing plant. Beautiful family. Did everything right. Robert came to me, not for advice, really, just to share his pride. He was 68. He'd just paid off his house. Took almost every penny of his savings to do it. But he was beaming, absolutely beaming. I own it now, he said, free and clear. My wife and I can finally relax. I congratulated him. What else could I do? But I also asked him gently, Robert, what's your monthly income now? He told me. Social Security, about $200 a month. A small pension, maybe another 800. And what's your monthly expenses? He paused, did the math in his head. Utilities, property taxes on that paid-off home, insurance, food, medicine. About $600 a month. So you're short every month. I said. He nodded, smiled a little less. We'll make it work. We always do. 3 years later, I heard from his daughter. Robert had a stroke. The medical bills, even with Medicare, were crushing. He couldn't work. His wife couldn't work. They needed help. And that house, that beautiful paid-off house, they had to take a reverse mortgage on it just to survive. Robert died at 74. The house went to the bank. Now, I don't tell you this story to make you sad. I tell you this because Robert made a decision that felt right, that felt responsible, that felt like the ending to a good American story. But it was the wrong decision, not because Robert was foolish, but because Robert was operating on old programming that made sense when you were 35, when you had time to rebuild, when opportunity was still in front of you. But at 60, at 70, time is the asset you can't buy back. Here's what I learned watching thousands of investors, thousands of business owners, thousands of regular people navigate their later years. The people who thrived, who actually enjoyed their retirement, who left something behind for their children. They weren't the ones who died debt-free. They were the ones who understood leverage. They were the ones who understood cash flow. They were the ones who understood that after 60, the game changes completely. See, when you're young, debt is dangerous. You've got no experience, no judgment, no discipline. A credit card in the hands of a 25-year-old is like a loaded gun in the hands of a child. But when you're 65, when you've lived through recessions and recoveries, when you understand the value of $1 because you remember when bread cost a nickel, debt becomes a tool, not a toy, not a crutch, a tool. Let me be very clear about something. I'm not telling you to go out and rack up credit card debt buying things you don't need. That's insanity at any age. What I'm telling you is this: if you have $100,000 in savings and $50,000 in low-interest debt, a mortgage at 3.5%, maybe a home equity line at 4%, the single worst financial decision you can make is to pay off that debt. Why? Because that $100,000 properly deployed can generate income. It can create options. That $50,000 in debt, it's costing you maybe $150 a month in interest, maybe $200. But that $100,000 in cash, that could be earning you $400 a month in dividends. $500 in rental income. It could be sitting in a high-yield savings account earning you $350 a month. You see the math. You pay off the debt, you save $150 a month in interest payments. But you lose $400 a month in income. Net result, you're $250 a month poorer. And you've lost all your liquidity, all your flexibility, all your ability to respond to life. No, I can hear some of you thinking, but what about the peace of mind? What about sleeping well at night knowing I don't owe anyone anything? And I respect that, I truly do. But let me ask you this: what brings you more peace? A zero balance on your mortgage statement, or knowing you have $100,000 in the bank that you can access in 24 hours your granddaughter needs emergency surgery? What lets you sleep better? A paid-off card, or having enough cash flow that you never have to choose between your medication and your groceries? Real peace doesn't come from what you don't owe. Real peace comes from what you control. And when you drain your savings to eliminate debt, you give up control. You trap your wealth in an illiquid asset that you can't access without selling, or borrowing, or dying. You built a prison out of your own accomplishment. I've seen this pattern over and over. People in their 60s and 70s making massive payments toward their mortgages, convinced they're doing the responsible thing, while their actual quality of life deteriorates. They can't afford to visit their kids. They can't afford to fix the roof properly, so they patch it. They can't afford fresh vegetables, so they buy canned. They can't afford the physical therapy that would keep them mobile, so they decline. All because they're being responsible. All because they're chasing a finish line that doesn't actually improve their lives. You want to know what wealthy people do? Really wealthy people, they keep their debt. They manage it. They use it strategically. Warren and I, we've had this conversation 100 times. The number of billionaires we know who have zero debt, you could count them on one hand. Not because they can't afford to pay it off, but because they understand that cheap debt, good debt, productive debt, is better than expensive equity. Would you rather have a mortgage at 3% or sell stock that's appreciating at 10% to pay it off? The math is simple. The psychology is hard. Let me give you a framework, a way to think about this that might help. After 60, you need to divide your debt into two categories. Category 1, toxic debt. This is high-interest credit card debt. Payday loans, any debt above 8 or 9% that's not backed by an appreciating asset. This debt is killing you. It's taking money out of your pocket every month and giving you nothing in return. Yes, pay this off. Aggressively. Sell things if you have to, but get rid of it. Category 2, strategic debt. This is your low-interest mortgage, your home equity line at 4%, maybe a car loan at 2.9% that you took because the dealership was practically giving money away. This debt, keep it. Manage it. Make your minimum payments and invest the difference. Because here's the truth. If you've got a mortgage at 3.5% and you pay it off, you just locked in a 3.5% return on your money. That's it. That's all you get. But if you keep that mortgage, keep making the minimum payment, and you take that extra cash and buy dividend stocks yielding 5%, or a rental property cash flowing $500 a month, or even just a treasury bond at 4.5% on, you're making money on the spread. The bank is paying you to owe them money. That's what intelligent people do. That's what wealthy people understand. Debt isn't good or bad. It's a tool. And like any tool, it can build or destroy, depending on whose hands it's in. When you reach 60, something shifts in the universe of money. The rules that governed your financial life for 4 decades, they don't just bend, they break completely. And the people who thrive, who actually build wealth in their later years, instead of just managing decline, they're the ones who recognize this shift and adjust accordingly. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret was 71 when I first heard her story. She'd been a schoolteacher for 34 years. Her husband passed when she was 68, left her with a modest life insurance policy, about $90,000, and a house with $45,000 still owed on the mortgage. Every financial advisor she spoke to, every well-meaning friend, every Dave Ramsey podcast she listened to, told her the same thing. Pay off that mortgage, Margaret. Be debt-free. That's what your husband would have wanted. And she almost did it. She almost wrote that check. But something stopped her. Some small voice inside, some instinct developed over 7 decades of watching life unfold told her to wait. So she did something different. She kept the mortgage was $380 a month at 3.2% interest, totally manageable on her pension and Social Security. And that $90, she divided it into 3 pieces. A $30,000 went into a high-yield savings account, her emergency fund, untouchable except for true emergencies. A $30,000 went into dividend-paying blue-chip stocks, the boring kind, utilities, consumer staples, companies that had paid dividends for 50 years straight. And the $30,000, this is the part that scared her, went into a down payment on a small duplex in a decent neighborhood about 15 minutes from her house. The duplex cost $190,000. She put $30,000 down. It took him $150,000 at 4.5%. Now, on paper, Margaret just went from $45,000 in debt to $195,000 in debt. Her children thought she'd lost her mind. Mom, you're 71 years old. You're supposed to be getting owed of debt, not INTO'd. But Margaret understood something her children didn't. She understood cash flow. That duplex, even after mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance as cash, flowed $650 a month. Real money. Money she could spend. Those dividend stocks, they were paying her about $110 a month. So now, instead of being debt-free, with zero in savings and no in monthly income beyond her pension, Margaret had $30 in emergency savings, a growing stock portfolio, a rental property that was appreciating, and an extra $760 a month in cash flow. Yes, she had debt, $105,000 of it, but that debt was working for her, not against her. 5 years later, Margaret was 76. The duplex had appreciated to $240,000. Her stocks had grown to $42,000. Her emergency fund was still intact. And that rental income, she'd raised rents twice. She was now clearing $850 a month. Her total debt down to about $175,000 between both properties because her tenants were paying it down for her. Her net worth increased by over $130,000. But here's the beautiful part. Margaret wasn't just wealthier on paper. Her life was better, tangibly better. She could afford to fly to visit her grandchildren twice a year instead of once. She could afford the organic groceries her doctor recommended. She could afford to hire someone to clean her house every 2 weeks, which meant she had more energy for the things she loved. She could afford to say yes when her church took a mission trip to Costa Rica. All because she didn't pay off her debt. All because she understood that after 60, liquidity is life. Now, I need to be honest with you about something. Margaret's story worked because Margaret understood 3 fundamental principles that most people miss. Principle 1, good debt pays you. Margaret didn't go into debt to buy a boat or a timeshare or a nicer car. She went into debt to acquire an income-producing asset. The duplex didn't cost her money every month. It paid her money every month. That's the difference between stupid debt and strategic debt. Stupid debt takes from your future to give to your present. Strategic debt takes from your present to give to your future. After 60, you can't afford stupid debt, not a dollar of it, but strategic debt, used properly. It's the difference between surviving retirement and thriving in it. Principle 2, inflation is your enemy, unless you owe money. Here's something they don't teach you in high school economics. Inflation destroys savers and rewards borrowers. If you have $100,000 in cash under your mattress And inflation runs at 3 a year. In 10 years, at 100,000 only buys what is 74,000 buys today. You lost 26,000 just by holding cash. But if you owe 100,000 on a fixed rate mortgage at 3.5%, that debt gets cheaper every year because you're paying it back with dollars that are worth less than the dollars you borrowed. The bank lent you $2034. You're paying them back with $2034. And $2034 are weaker. They buy less. They're worth less. You're essentially getting a discount on your debt automatically every single year. And if that debt is attached to an asset that appreciates with inflation, like real estate, you win twice. The debt gets cheaper. The asset gets more valuable. This is how wealthy people think. This is how generational wealth is built. Not by avoiding debt, by weaponizing it. Principle 3, cash flow is king. Net worth is meaningless. I don't care if you have $1 million net worth. If you can't access it, if it's all tied up in home equity and retirement accounts you can't touch without penalties, if it doesn't generate monthly income you can spend, you're still poor. You're just poor with a fancy balance sheet. Margaret could have had a net worth of $135,000, no debt, of $45,000 savings. Instead, she had a net worth of $150,000 with $195,000 in debt, but $1,060 a month in cash flow. Which one of those scenarios lets you live better? Which one gives you options? Which one means you don't have to panic when the transmission goes out on your car? Net worth is what you leave behind when you die. Cash flow is what you live on while you're alive. After 60, optimize for cash flow, not net worth, because you can't eat equity. Let me give you another example, a darker one, because I want you to understand both sides of this equation. I knew a couple, we'll call them Jim and Linda. They were in their mid-60s. They had about $200,000 in retirement savings. They had $60,000 left on their mortgage. They decided to pay it off. Made sense to them. Everyone said it was the smart move. So they took a $60,000 out of their savings, wrote the check, became debt-free. They were left with $140,000 in savings. Still a good amount. They felt secure. Then, 18 months later, Linda was diagnosed with cancer. The treatment was aggressive. The bills were catastrophic. Even with Medicare and supplemental insurance, they were facing $40 in and out of pocket costs over 2 years. They had the money. Barely. They paid it. But now their savings were down to $100,000. And then, because life doesn't stop for tragedy, the roof started leaking. The foundation needed work. The HVAC system died. Another $25,000. Savings down to $75,000. Jim was 70 by now. Linda was 68 and too weak to work. Jim was trying to do consulting work, but it was sporadic. They were burning through $3,000 a month more than their Social Security and pension covered. Do the math. At that rate, they had 25 months before the money ran out. And here's the tragic part. If they hadn't paid off that mortgage, if they'd kept that $60,000 in savings, they would have had $200,000 to work with when Linda got sick. They would have had breathing room, options, time. But they'd made the responsible choice. And now they were staring at bankruptcy at 70 years old because they'd optimized for a zero balance instead of for resilience. This is what I need you to understand. After 60, financial security doesn't come from what you've paid off. It comes from what you can access. It comes from liquidity, flexibility, options. The world doesn't stop charging you just because you paid off your mortgage. Your property taxes don't go to zero. Your insurance doesn't disappear. Your need for health care doesn't evaporate. And the emergencies, the true emergencies, the ones you can't predict, they don't care about your debt-free status. So when someone tells you, pay off all your debt before you retire, what they're really telling you is, trap all your wealth in illiquid assets and hope nothing bad happens. That's not a plan. That's a prayer. Here's what I want you to do instead. I want you to run a different calculation. Take every dollar of debt you have, write it down. Next to each debt, write the interest rate. Anything above 7%, that's category 1. Toxic, kill it as fast as you can. Anything below 5%, that's category 2. Strategic, keep it. Manage it, let inflation erode it. Anything between 5% and 7%, that's judgment territory. Depends on your personal situation. But here's the key question. For every dollar you're thinking about using to pay down debt, ask yourself, can this dollar earn more somewhere else? If you've got a mortgage at 3.5% and you can put that money in treasury bonds at 4.5% odd, you're losing money by paying off the mortgage. If you've got a car loan at 2.9% and you can invest that money in dividend stocks yielding 5%, you're losing money by paying off the car. The math is simple. The psychology is what kills people. Because we've been programmed, conditioned, brainwashed to believe that debt is always bad and being debt-free is always good. But that's not true. Debt is a tool. And the question isn't whether you should use tools. The question is whether you know how to use them properly. Let me share one more story before we move to part 3. There was a man named Thomas, 73 years old, widower, living on about $3.200 a month between Social Security and a small pension. Thomas had a problem. His house, the house he'd lived in for 42 years, the house where he raised his kids, it needed work, serious work. The electrical system was original to the house. The plumbing was failing. The windows were rotting. The estimates came back at $55,000 for the necessary repairs. Thomas had about $70,000 in savings, his only cushion in the world. Everyone told him the same thing: don't borrow. Don't take on debt at your age. Use your savings. But if he did that, he'd have a $15,000 left, $15,000 between him and catastrophe. So Thomas did something different. He went to his credit union. He took out a home equity line of credit for $60,000 at 5.2%. He used $55,000 to fix the house properly. Quality work, done right, and he kept his $70,000 in savings completely intact. Now, his monthly payment on that ALO, about $300 a month. Was it tight? Yes. Did it require him to budget carefully? Absolutely. But here's what happened. 18 months later, Thomas had a minor stroke. Nothing catastrophic, but he needed rehab, needed help, needed modifications to his home to make it safer. Cost about $18 after insurance. And Thomas had it. He had his $70,000 in savings. He could write the check without blinking. If he'd used his savings to fix the house, he'd have been destroyed by the stroke. But because he understood leverage, because he understood that a $300 a month in debt payments was cheaper than losing his entire safety net, he survived. More than survived, he thrived. You know what nobody tells you about turning 60? It's not just another birthday. It's not just another candle on the cake. It's the moment when time stops being your ally and starts being your adversary. Every financial decision you made at 40, when you had 25 years to recover from a mistake, those decisions made sense. But at 65, at 70, you don't have 25 years to recover. You might not have 15, you might not have 5. And that changes everything. I want to give you a framework now, something concrete. Something you can actually use when you're sitting at your kitchen table tonight, looking at your statements, trying to figure out what to do. I call it the 3-tier system. It's simple, it's powerful, and it works regardless of whether you have a 50,000 or 500,000. This is tier 1 is your foundation. This is 3 to 6 months of living expenses in cash in a high-yield savings account, completely liquid, completely accessible, not invested, not in stocks, not in bonds. Cash, this is your sleep well at night money. This is your the hot water heater exploded money. This is your I need to fly across the country tomorrow because my daughter needs me money. Everything else in your financial life is built on this foundation. And here's the critical part. You do not touch this money to pay off debt, ever. I don't care if you have a credit card at 18% interest. You don't raid your foundation to pay it off. You find another way. You sell something. You pick up work. You negotiate. Because the moment you drain your foundation, the moment you have zero cushion, you're one emergency away from disaster. And at 70 years old, disasters don't ask permission before they arrive. Tier 2 is your cash flow engine. This is money you've allocated to produce monthly income. Could be dividend stocks, could be rental property, could be a small business, could be bonds, could be a high-yield savings account if rates are good. The point is, this money isn't there to grow your net worth. It's there to generate cash you can spend every single month. And here's the rule for Tier 2. Every dollar in this tier needs to produce more income than your debt costs you. Let me say that again. If you're paying 3.5% on your mortgage, your Tier 2 money needs to earn more than 3.5%. If you're only earning 2% while paying 3.5%, then yes, you should probably pay down that debt instead. But if your Tier 2 money is earning 5% or 6% or generating $500 a month in rental income, then you keep the debt. You make the minimum payments. And you let the spread work for you. This is how you turn debt from an enemy into an employee. Two tiers, tier 3 is your legacy. This is money you probably won't need to spend in your lifetime. This is the money that's growing for your children, your grandchildren, your favorite charity. This money can take risks. This money can be in growth stocks. This money can be in real estate that won't pay off for 15 years. Because this money isn't for you. It's for them. Now here's what most people get wrong. They try to build tier 3 before they've secured tier 1 and tier 2. They've got $100,000 in the stock market, hoping it grows to $200,000 for their grandkids, while they've got $400,000 in their checking account and they're one car accident away from financial ruin. That's backwards. That's ego talking, not wisdom. So here's how this applies to the debt question. Let's say you're 67 years old. You've got $180,000 total savings. You've got a mortgage with $70,000 remaining at 3.8%. You've got a car loan with the $15,000 remaining at 5.5%. You've got $8,000 earned credit card debt at 16.9%. What do? First, you calculate your monthly living expenses. Let's say it's $4,000 in a month. 6 months of expenses is $24,000. That becomes tier 1, untouchable. Goes into a high-yield savings account earning whatever the best rate is. You're left with $156,000. Now, that credit card debt at 16.9%, that's toxic. That's category 1. That's a financial emergency. You pay it off immediately. Today, you're left with $100,000 to $8,000 under. The car loan at 5.5%, that's borderline. But here's the question. Can you invest a $15,000 and reliably earn more than 5.5%? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on your risk tolerance and investment skill. My suggestion, pay it off. Get rid of the payment. Simplify your life. You're left with the $133,000. Now the mortgage at 3.8% with $70,000 remaining. Here's where people make the mistake. They look at that $133,000 and that $70,000 mortgage and they think, I could be debt free. I could own my house outright, and they pay it off, leaving them with $63,000. And now they've got no debt, which feels wonderful. But they've also got no cash flow engine, no tier 2, no monthly income beyond Social Security. That $63,000 is earning them maybe $200 a month in interest if they're lucky. But if they'd kept the mortgage, if they'd kept the $70,000 invested, they could be earning $350 out a month in dividends, or $400, or more if they invested in rental property. So instead of saving the $280 a month in mortgage payments, they cost themselves $150 a month in lost income, and they gave up $70,000 in liquidity and flexibility. Here's what I would do instead. Keep the mortgage. Make the payments. They're manageable. Take $50,000 of that remaining $133 and build tier 2. Maybe it's a diversified portfolio of dividend aristocrats, companies that have raised their dividends every year for 25 years straight. Maybe it's a small rental property in a solid neighborhood. Maybe it's a mix. The $25,000 is a down payment on a duplex. The goal is to generate $400 to $600 a month in reliable cash flow. Then you've got $83,000 left. The $24,000 is in tier 1. Your $50,000 is in tier 2, all of your cash flow engine. That leaves $90,000 for tier 3. Money you can invest more aggressively for growth. And you've still got your mortgage $7,000 at 3.8%, being slowly paid down by your monthly payments while inflation makes it cheaper every year. This is balance. This is wisdom. This is how you optimize for the life you're actually living, not the life you think you're supposed to be living. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but what if I die with debt? What if I leave my kids with a mortgage to deal with? Let me address this directly. First, unless your kids co-signed on your debt, which they shouldn't have, they don't inherit your debt. When you die, your estate settles your debts from your assets. If there's a mortgage on your house, the house gets sold, the mortgage gets paid, and whatever's left goes to your heirs. They don't get a bill from the bank. They don't become responsible for your mortgage. That's not how it works. Second, and this is important, would you rather leave your kids a paid-off house worth $200,000 all, or a house with a $70,000 mortgage, plus $100,000 in cash and investments? The second option is worth more, significantly more, and it's liquid. They can access it immediately. They can pay off the mortgage if they want to, or they can keep it and invest the cash. But they have options. When you pay off the house before you die, you rob them of those options. You trap their inheritance in an illiquid asset they have to sell or borrow against to access. You did them a favor that actually cost them money. Let me tell you about a conversation I had years ago with a very successful businessman. He was 78, built a chain of hardware stores from nothing, sold it for 8 figures, very comfortable. And he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, "Charlie, I've been rich and I've been poor. And I can tell you without question, rich is better." I laughed. Everyone laughed. But then he got serious. He said, "But you know what's even better than being rich? Being liquid. I've seen people worth $5 million who couldn't come up with $50,000 in cash without selling something. And I've seen people worth $500,000 who could write a check for $100,000 tomorrow morning." The second group sleeps better. The second group has less stress. The second group actually enjoys their money, because wealth isn't what you own. Wealth is what you control. That stuck with me, because he was right. You can own $1 million house free and clear and still be stressed about money every single day. Or you can have a mortgage on a $400,000 house with $600,000 in liquid assets and feel completely secure. Same net worth, completely different lives. Here's another truth nobody wants to say out loud. The reason most financial advisors tell you to pay off debt, the reason it's such universal advice, is because it's safe advice. It's advice they can't get sued for. If they tell you to keep your mortgage and invest the money, and the market crashes, and you lose half your savings, you might sue them. But if they tell you to pay off your mortgage, the worst that happens is you're broke and stressed, but they're not liable. So they default to the conservative advice, the safe advice, the advice that protects them, not you. I'm not saying they're malicious. Most of them genuinely believe they're helping you, but they're optimizing for their risk, not yours. They're playing defense with your money, when what you actually need at 65 or 70 is intelligent offense. Let me give you one final framework, and then we'll bring this home. I want you to think about your financial life after 60 as a 3-legged stool. Leg 1, income you can't outlive. This is Social Security, pensions, annuities if you have them, money that shows up every month no matter what, until the day you die. Leg 2, cash flow from assets. This is dividends, rental income, interest, business income if you still have it. Money that's generated by things you own, not by trading your time. Leg 3, accessible reserves. This is your emergency fund, your cushion, your oh crap money. Cash you can get your hands on immediately when life happens. Now, when you pay off all your debt, you're strengthening leg 1 a tiny bit because your living expenses drop, but you're completely destroying legs 2 and 3. You have no cash flow engine. You have no reserves. You're balancing your entire retirement on one leg, and that's dangerous. That's unstable. That's how people fall. But when you keep strategic debt, when you maintain liquidity, when you build cash flow, all 3 legs stay strong. The stool is balanced. You're stable. You can weather storms. So here's my challenge to you. Tonight, when you go home, before you go to sleep, I want you to write down 3 numbers. Number 1, how much liquid cash can you access in 24 hours without selling anything or borrowing? Number 2, how much monthly cash flow do you receive from sources other than Social Security and pensions? Number 3, how much are you spending every month to service your debt? Look at those 3 numbers. Really look at them. If number 1 is less than 6 months of living expenses, you have a liquidity problem. If number 2 is 0 or close to 0, you have a cash flow problem. If number 3 is higher than number 2, then yes, you might have a debt problem. But if number 1 is solid, if number 2 exceeds number 3, if you've got breathing room and options, then you don't have a debt problem. You have a debt strategy. And the last thing you should do, the absolute last thing, is drain your liquidity to eliminate your debt. 2, I've lived a long time. I've watched a lot of people make a lot of decisions. And here's what I know. The people who died wealthy, who left legacies, who took care of their families, who enjoyed their final decades, they weren't the ones who were debt-free. They were the ones who were cash flow positive. They were the ones who understood that money is a tool, and debt is a tool. And the goal isn't to eliminate tools. The goal is to use them wisely. So please, I'm begging you, don't sacrifice your security for the illusion of freedom. Don't trade your liquidity for a paid-off balance sheet. Don't optimize for what sounds good at the funeral. Optimize for what works in the living room, because you've got years left, good years you've earned. and you deserve to live them with options, with dignity, with the freedom that comes from cash in the bank and income in your pocket, not with the false comfort of a zero balance and an empty account. To close your eyes for a moment. Not literally, of course, you're reading this, but close them in your mind. I want you to see yourself not as you are today, but as you will be 10 years from now, 15 years from now. What does that person need from you? What is that future version of yourself sitting in a chair on a quiet afternoon? What do they need you to understand right now? They need you to know that they don't care about the zero balance. They don't care about the paid-off mortgage statement you can frame on the wall. What they care about, what they desperately need, is the ability to say yes. Yes to the medical treatment that could give them 3 more good years. Yes to the flight to see their granddaughter graduate. Yes to the home care that lets them stay in their own house instead of going to a facility. Yes to dignity, to choice, to one more adventure, to one more sunrise. And you know what gives them that ability to say yes. Not a debt-free balance sheet, cash flow, liquidity, options. 2, I've spent my entire life studying money, studying businesses, studying human behavior. And if there's one thing I know with absolute certainty, it's that money is not the goal. Money is the tool that lets you live the life you were meant to live. And debt, properly understood, properly managed, properly respected, debt is just another tool in that toolbox. The carpenter doesn't throw away his saw just because a saw can cut you. He learns to use it properly. He respects it. He maintains it. And when he needs to build something, when he needs to create something, when he needs to solve a problem, he reaches for the right tool without fear, without shame, without the paralysis that comes from believing that tools are inherently dangerous. After 60, you are the carpenter. Your life is the project. And the question is not whether you should use debt. The question is whether you understand which tool to use, and when known why. So let me tell you what I hope for you. I hope that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when you're sitting with your morning coffee, watching the sun come up, you're not thinking about what you paid off. You're thinking about what you said yes to. I hope you said yes to the trip. I hope you said yes to helping your grandchild. I hope you said yes to the physical therapy that kept you mobile. I hope you said yes to the small indulgences that made you smile. I hope you said yes to living, fully living in these precious years you've earned. And I hope that when the unexpected came, when the emergency arrived, when life threw you the curveball it always throws, you had the resources to handle it. Not because you had no debt, but because you had cash, you had income, you had options. You would build a financial life that was resilient, flexible, strong enough to bend without breaking. You know what the real tragedy is. It's not the person who takes on debt and fails. It's the person who spends their final years in poverty, in stress, in constant worry, all because they made the responsible choice. All because they listened to the conventional wisdom. All because they paid off their mortgage and gave up their security in exchange for a piece of paper. That's the tragedy, not the debt, the missed opportunities, the unnecessary suffering, the decades of wisdom that's squandered on bad advice. 2, I want to leave you with a story. One last story. There was a woman named Elizabeth. She died at 93. For the last 15 years of her life, she lived in a beautiful assisted living facility. She had everything she needed: care, dignity, community. The cost, about $5,000 in a month. When she died, her estate went through probate. And here's what they found: worth about $180,000, with a mortgage on $140,000 remaining at 3.2%. She had stocks and bonds worth $430,000. She had cash in the bank, $85,000. And $85,000. Total debts $140,000. Net worth $745,000. Her children were confused at first. Why didn't she pay off the house? She could have easily paid it off. But then they did the math. That mortgage payment, it was $720 a month, the income from her stocks and bonds, about $400 a month. She generated an extra $600 added a month in net cash flow. Over 15 years, that was $122,400. But more than that, when the market crashed in 2008, when her stocks lost 35% of their value, she didn't have to sell anything. She had cash reserves. She had liquidity. She wrote it out. The stocks recovered. She was fine. If she'd paid off the house, She would have had to sell stocks at the bottom, lock in those losses, devastate her savings. And her kids realized their mother, at 78 years old, was smarter about money than any of them. She didn't optimize for a zero balance. She optimized for resilience. She optimized for options. She optimized for the ability to live well to the very end on her own terms. And because of that, she left them more money than they expected, and she lived better than they knew. So here's what I want you to remember. When someone tells you that you need to pay off all your debt after 60, what they're really telling you is that they don't understand the game you're playing anymore. They're still playing the game of accumulation, but you're playing the game of distribution. They're still thinking about growing net worth, but you need to be thinking about generating cash flow. They're optimizing for the balance sheet, but you need to optimize for the life you're living right now, today. Because here's the truth they won't tell you. No one ever lay on their deathbed and said, I wish I'd paid off my mortgage sooner. But plenty of people have wished they'd taken the trip. Plenty have wished they'd helped their family more. Plenty have wished they'd invested in their health. Plenty have wished they'd said yes instead of no just one more time. 2, your debt doesn't define you. Your net worth doesn't define you. What defines you is how you lived. Whether you experienced joy or just managed fear. Whether you created memories or just protected assets. Whether you trusted yourself enough to use the tools available to you. Or whether you threw them away because someone told you they were dangerous. You've worked your whole life for this. For these years. For this freedom. Don't give it away for a zero balance on a piece of paper. Keep your strategic debt, build your cash flow, protect your liquidity, and truly live the life you've earned. Because wealth isn't what you own. Wealth isn't what you've paid off. Wealth is the ability to wake up tomorrow morning and make choices based on what you want to do, not what you can afford to do. That's real freedom. That's real security. That's what your 60 years of work were building toward. So go claim it, not with fear, not with deprivation, but with wisdom, with confidence, and with the understanding that you have earned the right to live well, not just to survive, but to thrive. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for having the courage to question what everyone else takes for granted. That courage, that willingness to think differently, that's what separates those who merely age from those who truly live. May your remaining years be filled with cash flow, with options, with dignity, and with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you made the right choice, not the easy one, not the popular one, but the right one. For you, for your family, for the life you deserve. Go forth with peace. Go forth with wisdom. And go forth knowing that your best years might just be ahead of you.